Let's pray together. Divine Mother, Heavenly Father, friend, beloved God, great masters of Kriya Yoga, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Shri Yukteswarji, beloved Gurudev, Paramhansa Yogananda Ji, saints and sages of all religions, dear friend and guide Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow at thy feet. O great ones, be with us here today. Help us to tune into thy consciousness, thy joy, thy blessings, thy guidance. We are thine, be thou eternally ours. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Let's chant together.
So do thou, my Lord, so do thou, my Lord, thou and I never apart, thou and I never apart. Wave of the sea dissolving the sea, wave of the sea dissolving the sea. I am the bubble, make me the sea. I am the bubble, make me the sea. Make me the sea, oh make me the sea. Make me the sea, oh make me the sea. Wave of the sea dissolving the sea. Wave of the sea dissolving the sea. I am the bubble, make me the sea. I am the bubble, make me the sea. Make me the sea, oh make me the sea. Make me the sea, oh make me the sea. Wave of the sea dissolving the sea. Wave of the sea dissolving the sea. I am the bubble, make me the sea. So do thou, my Lord. So do thou, my Lord. Thou and I never apart. Thou and I never apart. Wave of the sea dissolving the sea. Wave of the sea dissolving the sea. I am the bubble, make me the sea. I am the bubble, make me the sea. Make me the sea, oh make me the sea. Make me the sea, oh make me the sea. Wave of the sea dissolving the sea. Wave of the sea dissolving the sea. I am the bubble, make me the sea. So do thou, my Lord. I am the bubble, make me the sea. So do thou, my Lord.
Just for a moment, tuning into this chant, offering this little self into the higher self. Gazing up at the point between the eyebrows. Tuning into our highest potential, higher reality, the divine consciousness, the Christ consciousness within each one of us. Om Shanti. So, the last chapter we saw how, after various schools that he was going through and various, troubles he was facing with not being able to, belong to the place or to that particular school or the group of children. Swamiji then, tries an experiment where he says, okay, let me see. If I try to conform to them, then what happens? But in the process, what happens is, in the process of conforming to the what other people are doing or what they feel is the right thing to do, he starts, though it just started as an experiment, but over a period of time, he actually started enjoying what he was trying out at. So the kind of music, the swing music, he was liking it. And then the habits that he got into of, smoking and other things, and also, getting involved with very trivial things, the what is happening, who did what, that kind of things. So kind of, he was feeling it, that, that he was kind of, and it wasn't like he was not enjoying it. He was very much enjoying it also. So that is what is a scary thing, that uh, though, we can say that, there is a reason why, there's always a valid reason, we can say that this is the reason I did it. But habits, once they start, we form a certain thing, we get into something, after that it is they take over. At some point we are not able to get out of it so easily. Though, people can say, oh no, nothing will happen, just one drink, one thing, smoke, it's not going to become addictive for me. But you never know. So because as master also said that, it's that one thing might be just for this lifetime. Probably the seed has all of this tendency or the habit has already been planted in a different lifetime. So it all, what it took, that one trigger, that, that all came, that tendency came back completely. And, then the person is struggling with it. So we took all that, that was our takeaway, to see what is it, that any particular habit that we want to get away from, what was the trigger in this lifetime, and what all can we do about it. And affirmations, we discussed, we practiced affirmations of how to overcome things, and what else can we do. So today we come to the next chapter, to thine own search be true. So before we discuss that, let us first listen to the the reading by Swamiji.
Chapter 7, To Thine Own Search Be True. I graduated from Scarsdale High School in June 1943, shortly after turning 17. The first thing I did after graduation was go to a sort of peace camp. I no longer remember why I went or how I found out about it, but it turned out an indoctrination attempt.
Yes, yes. Not audible now. I can hear you.
Shortly after turning 17. First thing I did after graduation was go to a sort of peace.
Hello. Was it audible?
Yes, Jayanti ji.
Went or how I'd found out about it, but it turned out to be an indoctrination attempt to interest young people in socialism. I remember a lecture a Swedish woman gave, heavily promoting the socialism in her country. After her talk, I raised my hand.
You've listed the benefits of socialism, I said. Surely if this system were so perfect, it must also be sufficiently convincingly so that there would be no need to persuade people to accept it. Are there also reasons why it hasn't been universally accepted? In the name of fairness, it would be helpful if you told us also of its possible drawbacks. The woman, outraged at my impertinence, fairly spluttered, "Why, there are no drawbacks!" I promptly lost interest in everything she had to say, and in what the camp itself was promoting. I had begun in any case to understand that any outward perfection is always diminished, or even nullified, by some opposing imperfection. In fact, I was to learn years later from my guru that the whole universe is founded on the principle of Dvaita, duality. For every up there is a down, for every plus a minus. Only God is one, without a second. An older man from Persia, named, if memory serves, Reza Shashahama, who was also attending the camp, commented to me toward the end of it that my presence had contributed a voice of reason. My attempt to adjust during the past year to the norms of others had shown me that no norm was fully to be trusted. After my peace camp experience, Bob and I were invited by George Calvert, a school friend of ours, to work with him on his father's farm in upstate New York. There we picked strawberries and pitched hay. The work was vigorous, healthful, and good fun. After 6 or 7 weeks as a farm hand, I decided to take advantage of my vacation to broaden my experience of the world. The change I hit upon was radical. From bucolic pastures to gray skyscrapers and sterile acres of concrete. New York. I worked there as a messenger boy for the Herald Tribune, every day dodging determined cars, trucks, and buses, and weaving through impatient hordes of shoppers. My fellow messenger boys and I visited the inner sanctums of well-known department stores, delivered advertising copy to and from countless corporations, and swept pell-mell through the rushing bloodstream of big city life. The myriad sense impressions were stimulating, almost overwhelming. In faces madly bobbing down crowded sidewalks, in the pleading glances of girls from behind drugstore counters, in fleeting smiles, frosty stares, angry gestures, twitching lips, and self-preoccupied frowns, I saw mankind in caricature, exaggerated out of all credible proportion by its sheer multifariousness. Here was a veritable sea of humanity, the youthfully exuberant, the sad and lonely, the stage-struck, the determinedly success-oriented, the hard, the cynical, the fragile, the lost, all hurrying, all harassed to desperation by a tumbling surf of conflicting ambitions and desires. New York, its surging waves of humanity charm and repel at the same time. They encourage a sense of exaggerated self-importance in those who pride themselves on living in one of the largest, most vital cities in the world. They also drown a person's sense of self-importance in the general indifference. New Yorkers face a perennial conflict between their own boasted self-worth and their crushing but inevitable sense of anonymity. Beneath the frenzied pace of big city life, God whispers to the soul, "Dance with bubbles if you like, but when you tire of dancing and the bubbles begin one by one to burst, look about you. See within all those bobbing faces their underlying relationship to you. They are your spiritual brothers and sisters, mirrors to your own self. They, oh tiny ripple, are you. Transcend your littleness. Discover your oneness with all life." When autumn came, I began my higher education at Haverford College, a small men's college on the railway main line to Paoli from Philadelphia. At that time, because of the war, Haverford was smaller than ever. The students were bright-eyed, enthusiastic, and intelligent. the professors quiet, sedate, seriously preoccupied with their students' welfare. Haverford is a Quaker college and conveys the simple, serene dignity that one might expect of any institution run by that Pacific sect. I don't mean we students didn't have our normal boyish share of high times, but these were inflicted on a background of gentle disapproval from the discreet grey stone and ivy buildings, and of restrained dismay from our ever-concerned faculty. The diminished student body was composed mostly of freshmen, a fact which didn't conduce greatly to the maintenance of certain hallowed traditions, such as freshman hazing. When a handful of upperclassmen appeared in our dormitory one day to subject us to that ancient rite, we met them with another venerable American institution, the bum's rush. With whoops of joy, flying pillows, energetic shoves, and a solid phalanx of inverted chairs, we drove them down the stairs and out of the building. Thereafter they left us strictly alone, concluding no doubt that in wartime there are certain sacrifices that older and wiser heads must make in the name of peace. We freshmen were so dominant numerically that I actually made the football team. One of my problems at Scarsdale High, apart from my light weight, had been the fact that I could never throw the ball properly. My hands were simply too small to get a grip on it. At Haverford, our coach, Pop Haddleton, solved this problem by making me a running guard. Counting on speed rather than weight, I pulled many a larger lineman off balance, while he was still shifting his body into position to block me. I then dashed through the line and often caught a runner before he'd got off to a good start with the ball. The other left guard on our team, a boy named Mason, was as lightweight as I. Our college newspaper soon began dubbing us the Watch Charm Guards. We played the whole game, every game. There was no such thing in those days as offensive and defensive teams. Sports-wise, the season was a success. We were unbeaten, untied, and unscored upon. My big play of the season came near the end of one of the last games. Up to that point, neither team had scored. Our captain decided in a last desperate move to try an end run down half the length of the field. I was to run interference. We cleared the end safely and were well on our way into enemy territory when two big bruisers rushed up to intercept our runner. I prepared to block the first of them, hoping our runner would succeed in dodging the second. One of my boots, unknown to me, had come untied. Just as I was diving to block the first opponent, I tripped on a dangling shoelace. Sprawling full length on the ground, I made a perfect, although involuntary, double block. Our man went on to make the touchdown, and I was the hero of the hour. I tried to explain what had really happened, but no one wanted to believe me. As I said, we won every game that season, and so it was that my athletic career reached a happy climax, before petering out altogether. For soon afterward, college sports and I came to a rather distant parting of the ways. The separation was due partly to my own increasing preoccupation with the search for meaning, and partly, I'm afraid, to the fact that I was attaching meaning to a few wrong things, like sitting in local bars with friends, nursing a variety of poisonous decoctions, and talking philosophy into the wee hours. I began to devote much of my free time also to writing poetry, the themes of which related to the questions that had long puzzled me. Why suffering? Why warfare and destruction? How can God countenance hatred, violence, and other forms of human madness? Surely, I thought, suffering can't be his will for us. Must it not be a sign, rather, that man is out of harmony with his will? And what of eternal life? Not even matter or energy are reflected can be destroyed. Was it not reasonable then to suppose that life too is eternal? And if so, what about the reality of heaven and hell? I wrote a poem at this time in which I postulated a world after death that was perceived differently by each individual, seeming to be either beautiful or ugly, happy or sad, according to the state of consciousness he brought over from this world. Not so far from the truth, actually, for I have since learned that when people die, they do go to realms that are compatible with whatever state of consciousness they have themselves developed. At this point in my life I might easily have embraced a religious calling, but I knew too little about religion and had found no meaningful guidance from anyone in religion, guidance that seemed to me rooted in wisdom. Haverford College is a prominent centre of Quakerism. In my time there, leading members of this society were on the faculty: Douglas Steere, Rufus Jones, Howard Comfort. I was impressed by their transparent earnestness and goodness. I also liked the Quaker practice of sitting quietly in thoughtful meditation at the Sunday services. Meetings, these were called. Above all, I liked the Quakers for their simplicity. Everything they did seemed to me admirable. At the same time, however, I found no challenge in it. I was seeking a path that would engross me utterly, not one that I could contemplate benignly while puffing on a pipe. Sunday meetings became, all too frequently, scenes of genteel competition. The Quakers have no ordained ministers. Their members sit in silence on Sunday mornings until one of them feels moved by the Spirit to rise and share some inspiration with others. Haverford, being an intellectual community, our Sunday services were more than usually taken up with this kind of spiritual generosity. Hardly a minute passed in silence before someone else was on his feet, sharing with us all. Sometimes two or more were moved by the Spirit simultaneously, though courtesy in such cases always prevailed. I myself never felt moved to speak, for I was still questioning the nature of truth. I'll never forget Douglas Steere rising to his feet one day to inquire brightly, "Is there a little bird in your bosom?" Involuntarily my hand went to my chest. The solemnity of the occasion and my own respect for him prevented me from succumbing to hilarity on the spot. Afterward, however, my friends and I made up delightedly for our heroic repression. Needless to say, I had much still to learn, not the least of it being reverence and humility. It may be that those religious leaders had more to teach me than I knew. Since I didn't know it, however, I had no choice but to follow my own star. Early during my first semester at Haverford, I made friends with Julius Katchen, who later acquired fame in Europe as a concert pianist. I loved his intensity and enthusiasm, and though I was less agreeably impressed by his egotism loudly affirmed, I found compensation for it in his romantic devotion to every form of art, music, and poetry. Our friendship flourished in the soil of kindred artistic interests. In this relationship, Julius was the musician and I the poet. Through our association, my feelings for poetry became more musical, artistically more romantic. Julius's mother, too, had been a concert pianist. When I visited the Katchen home in Long Branch, New Jersey, I was caught up in his entire family's devotion to the arts. At this time also I took a course in poetry composition at nearby Bryn Mawr College, under the famous poet W.H. Auden. Auden encouraged me in my poetic efforts. For some time thereafter, poetry became my outward focus of self-expression. Yet there was another side of me that could not remain satisfied for long with beautiful phraseology, nor with Keats's romantic fiction, "Beauty is truth, truth beauty, that is all ye know on earth, and all ye need to know." In every question, what mattered most to me was not whether an idea was beautifully stated, nor whether the truths it expressed were themselves beautiful, but whether in some much deeper sense it, and they really were true. In this concern, I found myself increasingly out of tune with the approach our professors took, which was to view any actual commitment with suspicion. Scholarly detachment, not involvement, was their guiding principle. That's all very well, I would think. I want to be objective too. But I don't want to spend my life sitting on a fence. Even objectivity ought to lead to conclusions of some kind. To my professors, scholarly detachment meant holding a perennial question mark up to life. It meant supporting, for the sake of discussion, positions to which they didn't really subscribe. It meant showing equal interest in every argument without endorsing any of them. I was impatient with such indecisiveness. My need for truths to which I could commit myself had posed a problem for me in our debating society at Kent School. It made me a failure in public speaking classes during my freshman year at Haverford. It made me a bad actor in the plays I occasionally took part in at college and afterward. My firm commitment to truth spoiled my chances years later of becoming a radio announcer, when I learned that the job demanded an excited outpouring of lyrical enthusiasm for every product, every issue, the sponsors of which were paying for their block of time. Were I to accept the job, I'd be expected to promote products and ideas about which I knew nothing. A professional announcer told me once, "It's very simple, a sort of trick. I just put my mind on automatic pilot and don't even listen to the words coming out of me." Could I wax poetic over a special brand of soap just because the advertisers raved about the shining bubbles it produces? If I spoke, I had to mean what I said. Otherwise, my only alternative was silence. I could not be false or hypocritical, even about trivial issues or non-issues. More and more, my hunger for truth gave me difficulties as a student as well, particularly in such subjects as English literature and philosophy. I had to know whether what was being given us for our consideration was true. In reaction against my professors and their insistence on a spirit of polite scholarly inquiry, I gradually developed a rebellious attitude toward college in general. It was at about this time that I met a student at Haverford whose search for truth coincided more nearly with my own. Rod Brown was 2 years older than I, very intelligent, and a gifted poet. At first our relationship was one of learned sage and unlettered bumpkin of a disciple. Rod treated me with a certain amused condescension as the ingenuous youngster that I certainly was. My poems he read tolerantly, never lavishing higher praise on them than to call them nice. His own poems I couldn't even understand. He would quote at length from countless books I'd never heard of, and managed to make each quotation sound so important that the listener got the impression that only a confirmed ignoramus would dare to face life without the ability, at least to paraphrase that passage. Rod was a sensitive young man who had learned early in life to fend off others' rejection of him by treating them with disdain. It was purely a defense mechanism, but he carried it off well. I was as intrigued by his superior attitude toward me for my ignorance as I was captivated by his single-minded devotion to philosophical realities. Surely, I thought, if he knew enough to look down on me, it behooved me to learn what the view was from his altitude. In time we became fast friends. I discovered that besides his enthusiasm for the truth, he had a delightful sense of humor. He was also eager to share with others his ideas and opinions, always fresh and interesting. Rod only raised a supercilious eyebrow at my theories about God, suffering, and eternal life. Rhetorically, he would ask me, how can anyone know the truth about such issues? He directed my thinking constructively, however, toward more immediate issues. For the time being, my quest for spiritual truths was, if not abandoned, at least put on a shelf. Where the search is for truth, however, Can true religion be very far away? Indeed, Rod's thinking and mine verged constantly on the spiritual. He introduced me to Emerson and Thoreau. I drank eagerly at the fountain of wisdom in Emerson's The Oversoul, in Self-Reliance, and in Thoreau's Walden. These writings were the closest I had come so far to the vast panorama of Indian wisdom. Footnote: in those days, courses in Indian studies were comparatively rare. The only actual exposure I ever got to them was from Douglas Steere in his freshman course on the history of philosophy. For the first 20 minutes of his first class, Dr. Steere touched lightly on the Vedas, giving us the impression merely that Indian philosophy existed. For though I didn't realize it at the time, both authors, that is, Thoreau and Emerson, admired the Indian scriptures and echoed in their own writings the lofty teachings of the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita. Rod urged me to stop concerning myself with abstractions and to face the more concrete problem of how to live sensibly in the present day. One of the principles we discussed night after night was the importance of non-attachment. Another was the courage to reject values that we considered false, even if everyone else believed in them. Amusing as it seems now, we spent hours in intellectual discussion on the uselessness of intellectuality, and deciding that the uneducated masses were surely more genuine in their simple, earthy interests than we ourselves. We set out with exploratory zeal to frequent the haunts of truck drivers and manual laborers. No deep wisdom ever came of these outings, but then people who hold cherished theories rarely feel a need to sustain their mental fare on the coarse diet of facts. Not everything Rod said or did won my support. He told me approvingly, for instance, of an older French friend of his named Jean, whose heart was unnaturally small. To both Rod and his friend this fact suggested a wholesome absence of the emotions that distort the intellect's clear perceptions. True insight, they believed, demanded the complete separation of the intellect from feeling of any kind, which would result in non-attachment and true objectivity. I disagreed with their equation, however, for I considered non-attachment and feeling not at all incompatible. I felt the important point rather was for one's feelings also to be impersonal. Non-attachment releases one from personal identity with things, but should therefore permit an expansion, not an elimination of feeling. It is personal feelings resulting in emotions that distort objectivity. Rod also believed that, armed with a genuine spirit of non-attachment, one could behave in as worldly a manner as he pleased. This argument struck me, however, as too convenient a rationalization for his own worldly tendencies. Rod, despite his disdain for middle-class values and his praise of lower-class simplicity, betrayed a marked fondness for upper-class luxuries. Though he often mocked me for it, I myself considered innocence a truer safeguard of non-attachment. Rod, like most people, had his shortcomings. He was, among other things, somewhat intolerant of disagreement, proud of his own brilliance, and unabashedly lazy. For all that, however, he was at heart a loving and true friend, deeply concerned about others despite his vaunted indifference to them, more hurt by anyone's rejection of him than honestly disdainful in return, and a great deal more conservative in his values than he would ever have admitted. While others clucked at him disapprovingly, I saw him as someone who could help me to think boldly for myself. For this reason, above all, I was grateful for his friendship. Yet, in my association with him, I also acquired some of the very traits I didn't approve of in him. Such indeed is the power of all human associations. Like Rod, I developed intellectual pride as a defense against rejection and misunderstanding. Worst of all, perhaps, I acquired some of his worldliness, though never so much of it that Rod ceased to twit me for what he called my naivete. In those days it was Rod who gave me my real education. My classes formed a mere backdrop. They taught me facts, but in discussions with him I learned what I would do with facts. Night after night we sat discussing life, over pots of coffee in our rooms, or over drinks in bars, or over milkshakes in an off-campus restaurant with the engaging name The Last Straw. We had few friends, but this fact no longer really mattered to me. I was seeking truth now, not the mere popularity of shared opinions.
So interesting. Actually, the title itself of this chapter is very interesting. To thine own search be true. So I just, I was trying to understand what does he mean by that. So I Googled it. It is from, it's one of the dialogues or the statement from Shakespeare's Hamlet, one of the scenes, and means that one should be true to their principles and who they are. They should not strive to please other people by changing what they believe in or acting in a way that is outside of what they're reality they really want to. And this is actually a very yogic thing, right? That all this while he was, because he was not able to conform to the standards of other people, he was trying to be somebody he wasn't. So that is why now he's again coming back to the fact that, that didn't, though it worked, he was becoming very popular, but that is not really the right thing to do. So I think that, and that is the reason he's now, put this as a title of this chapter, that you shouldn't be compromising on your principles. Like Sri Yukteswar also said, that when it comes to the matter of principles, one should be like a lion and soft when, other things that emotions and all are concerned. But I'm not saying the right word. I'll put it in the group later. But when principles are concerned, then you shouldn't compromise. So this is a yogic principle. And Swamiji was like, instinctively tuning into that you don't have to conform to other people's standards. If it doesn't feel right inside, the conscience is not feeling very good about it, you should listen to that. So here we are, where he's again, going, looking for various things, attending different things, because he's constantly in search. He doesn't know what it is he wants and where will he find it, but he's this constant search, constant quest is on for him. And where he says that, when that he went to this lady was that peace camp, the first page, he talks about this an important thing again, where he instinctively understood. He says, I promptly lost interest in everything she had to say, because he realized I had begun in any case to understand that any outward perfection is always diminished or even nullified by some opposing imperfection. As later on he says that I learned years later, because then Yogananda, when he was introduced to Yogananda, and he realized the teachings which says that this whole world, this creation is made on this principle of duality, right? So for every high, there will be a low. For every morning, there will be a night. For every day, there will be a night. For every light, there will be darkness. For happiness, there will be unhappiness. So everything has this thing. So instinctively, when this lady was talking about something that was so beautiful, so perfect, he couldn't believe it, because he felt there has to be a catch, because it cannot, in this outward world, nothing is ever going to be perfect. That he knew it. Why he felt it? It's because of his, he understood it more intellectually probably, or more instinctively, but later on only, when his master came, he understood what it actually meant. So this is one thing, but he was very instinctive about it, right? And he even goes on to say, for every up, there is a down. For every plus, a minus. Only God is one, without a second, which is the crux of Indian, philosophy, you can call it, that Dvait, Advait. Advait philosophy, I mean, Adi Shankaracharya and many other great saints talked about this, that there is only one truth, and that is God, who doesn't have a Dvait to it, right? Advaita philosophy is what it is. And he knew it. He somewhere he knew this. Okay, so then and he's very observant when he says he came to New York, and he's even as he is going about doing his things, he is observing. He's observing the faces, the people, where somebody is like, sad, somebody is angry, somebody is making angry gestures. It's like everybody is in their own space, running around somewhere. Swamiji in one of his books writes beautifully that, if you ask any New Yorker, where would you like to be? They would say, oh, Hawaii. And he said, you go to Hawaii, and it's like, it's just beautiful. It's like beautiful beaches, clean beaches. The nature gives you plentiful of the fruits and everything. Everything is beautiful. You look up, it's a blue sky. It's just picture perfect. And you ask any Hawaiian, are they happy being there? They will say no. Where do you want to be? They'll say New York. So that is the unfortunate part, that everyone is not happy with what they have. They want to be somewhere else. So and he says that everybody is rushing around in New York, where he says New Yorkers are constantly on the move. But he says, beneath the frenzied pace of big city life, God whispers to the soul, dance with bubbles if you like. But when you tire of dancing and the bubbles begin one by one to burst, look about you. See within all those bobbing faces their underlying relationship to you. They are your spiritual brothers and sisters, mirrors to your own self. They, oh tiny ripple, are you. Transcend your littleness. Discover your oneness with all life. Here he is like, he's already tuning into that great reality, right? That's the chant we sang today. I'm the bubble, make me the sea. So underneath everything, we are so caught up in this creation. That is what this Maya is. That we think that I am separate, you are separate, everybody is separate, things are separate. This is this, but everything underlying everything is like, as Master described, that on a gas burner, there will be like this small holes from which the different the parts of that the gas is burning. Underneath it all is that one source from which all of this is coming. So we have to, the more we go back to our center is when we will be able to identify with that. So till we do that, we will be happy being just this little bubble, and every other bubble, identifying, being separate from others, till we merge back into that vast ocean. So okay, and then he talks about this, his school, his college days and all, the matches that they played. But again and again, and then he lost interest, because it wasn't really. I mean, even though he was doing pretty well for what talent he had, he was doing well. They won, and again, there is always that again, he was always principled in that. When his shoelace came off and he fell down, and in the process, the other teams, they couldn't win, and he was made the hero. He says, I tried to explain what had really happened, so no one wanted to believe me, but he didn't want to keep that credit. Anybody else would have said, okay, it's okay, I'm getting the credit for it's fine, but he didn't. He felt no, it didn't belong there, because it was a genuine thing. Something happened, and so happened that I managed to make this. So this is where he's talking about being principled. When somebody is saying something which um, he's questioning, there is a constant question: is this truth? Is this truth? And here again, he's insisting on being truthful, right? And then again, why he stopped saying, he says the separation was partly due to my own increasing preoccupation for the search for meaning. He is always seeking. There is something beyond what we are going through. What is it? So that question is always on his mind, and that is not allowing him kind of to uh, just stay with whatever is just on the periphery of this existence. And questions like, why are we suffering? Why are warfares happening? How can God allow this to happen? Again, he says, when he's questioning, he also kind of intuits into that answer. He says, surely I thought suffering can't be his will for us. Must it be a sign rather that man is out of harmony with his will? And this is what his master later on, explained this. Where we know that, when the master gave us the divine will healing, he said that, man, there are three windows through which the God's light come into us: physical, mental, and spiritual. God doesn't want us to suffer, he says. And it is because we suffer because we have closed one of the windows, or all three of the windows. And the all physical, even physical and mental suffering is because of the main cause is the spiritual ignorance. And when we talk about, closing the window, it can be in this lifetime or many lifetimes ago. So what we have closed, we have to open. So the disease, when he says disease, his master said, is man is out of harmony with God's will. Otherwise, there will be no suffering. And again, Swamiji was able, because he was constantly questioning, but he was understanding it. But that endorsement of, yes, this is what it is, came much later, after he met master. And he says, what of eternal, again, he's probably this all coming from his past lives of, being a yogi. Because otherwise it's very difficult to believe somebody in the American who's never been exposed to that kind of, because when the eternal life, again, the Christianity never even talks about, they only talk about this one life, right? So, but he's understanding that there is eternal life. He says, not even matter or energy I reflected can be destroyed. Was it not reasonable then to suppose that life too is eternal? And if so, what about the reality of heaven and earth? So he again understood Bhagavad Gita, and Krishna says that when he's counseling Arjuna to fight that war, and when Arjuna is saying, no, they are all my relatives, how can I kill them? And he says, you have to fight, and because it's the right cause, and nobody really is killed, Arjuna. The soul is indestructible. When you can't burn it with a fire, you can't kill it, you can't drown it. So he was advising, and Swamiji again, when he's thinking about it, he's understanding this somewhere. But again, there is nobody to endorse this. There's nobody to say, yes, that is how it is. This is how he's like just coming to various conclusions, but not very sure about it, right? And where he writes this poem, the next page number 62, he says, in which I postulated a world after death that was perceived differently by each individual, seeming to be either beautiful or ugly, happy or sad, according to the state of consciousness he brought over from this world. And that is again what Master said, that at the time of death, whatever is, topmost on your mind, desires or regrets, is where, whatever kind of consciousness the person dies with, is where he will inhabit in that astral world. So a higher, like saints and all will go to a much higher astral world, which is beautiful. And most of the ordinary souls who are like, very caught up in this world, in the cycle of life and death, they kind of go to a much lower astral plane, and most of the time they're not even aware, they're just sleeping. And when, again, their karma and their desires and regrets bring them back. So again, he's able to intuitively understand. He's trying to figure out what it is, or it's just a memory of uh, what he has experienced before. So this shows that Swamiji was not just a normal person who is trying to um, understand or chanced upon a spirituality. It shows that he already had a little, not little, he already had some understanding of how this whole thing works, this creation works, his God's plan works. It's just that he needed uh, that endorsement, or that spark that only a guru can give him, that will finally awaken in him the true understanding. So again, here he says Haverford College is a prominent center of Quakerism. And this Quakerism it says, what is a Quaker? It's a member of a religious society of friends, a Christian movement founded in 1650, and which devoted to peaceful principles. The central to the Quakers' belief is the doctrine of the inner light, or sense of Christ's direct working in the soul. So this has led them to reject both formal ministry and all set forms of worship. So in some way, the Quakers were rejecting what the church, as Swamiji said, churchianity. It's not, churchianity is different from what Jesus had really taught. So they rejected that churchianity and they were trying to go in, but still it wasn't deep enough. It was, as he says, that it wasn't. He found no challenge in it, and he was seeking a path, he says, that would engross me utterly, not one that I could contemplate benignly while puffing on a pipe. So though they had touched upon that thing, they were not deep enough, or they didn't understand it enough to go much deeper in this. And then the practice that he was saying, that the spirit will touch and they'll start saying, which seemed very superficial, or even I want to say something kind of a thing. So he kind of moved away from that. And again, he says, then he met somebody who was a pianist. He was a quite famous pianist, and Swami then got writing poems for him. So it was kind of influenced. He was just being influenced by the company he was placing. So he started writing a particular kind of poems. And now we come to this part where he says, to my professors, scholarly detachment meant holding a perennial question mark to life, but just for the sake of discussion. Whereas he wanted answers, not just because you just to have a debate with somebody. He wanted to know the truth. There is where the difference was. And he says, my need for truths to which I could commit myself had posed a problem for me in any debating society, because he couldn't talk just for the sake of debating. So you are taking one position, so I will take the other position. No, he couldn't. He would want to take the position which is the right, and because of that, he couldn't act in many of the things. He couldn't become the radio jockey, because again, he didn't want to write poems or something for money, just because some sponsor is giving paying. So whether he believed in it or not, he couldn't just write things. So it was always principles. He didn't want to compromise on that just for the sake of money, just for company, just so that. So he had experimented with that. Now he realized, no, I'm not going to compromise on it. So truth, I would stick to that. He was always very principled on that. A principle of truth is also something that is like dharma, dharmic, something that is right. So here it wasn't harming anyone, right? Even if he had written a advertising line for the soap, but for him it didn't make sense. It was not something he believed in, so he wouldn't do. Throughout his life, he said, even during after he had created Ananda and all, he said one of the guiding principles of for him has always been yato dharma tato jaya. So that is this is one guiding principle for Ananda. He said, where there is dharma, there is victory. The other he spoke about was people are more important than things. We will discuss that later. But these two principles he always worked with, even during, so he wouldn't compromise on that. Throughout, I mean, through all the challenges that, he faced when he was setting up Ananda or in running Ananda. Okay, and then he meets this friend who, always felt that he was a much higher level poet. And Swamiji allowed him to, he was like, he says that he was like a sage and I am this unlettered bumpkin of a disciple. So he looked up to this fellow because he seemed to know more than him. And though that boy was more egoistic. So he says his superior attitude towards me for my ignorance, as I was captivated by his single-minded devotion to philosophical realities. But surely, he said, if he knew enough to look down on me, then it behoved me to learn what the view was from his altitude. There's so much of humility. So, if you see this chapter, that it shows even before he came on the path, it shows the qualities that Swamiji had. One, always sticking to truth, the quest for truth and sticking to truth, not even taking credit where it doesn't belong. So if it is not right, it is not true, then he wouldn't take it. And questioning if there is something, not doing something just because it is convenient, because he was making money, he couldn't do it. And now we're coming to the part that there's so much of humility. He says, if he feels superior, rather than, me saying, how dare he feel superior, he says, let me find out, like, can I climb some more to come to his level of look from there, his altitude. Probably, there's something I need to learn. So there's so much of humility in that. And he says, but the next, when we go to here, then he talks about where they are. The friend was introducing him to various books, and that's when he says, I got introduced to the Indian teachings. But the friend was also, when Swamiji was talking about any philosophy, he would also say that, just stick to the concrete problems of today. You have to be practical. Whereas, later on, Swamiji realized, understood from studying the Bhagavad Gita and all, that those are not just mere philosophies. Where Rod is saying to stop concerning myself with abstractions and to face the more concrete problem of how to live sensibly in the present day. That is what Bhagavad Gita is all about. It is the most practical. So it is how to live is given in that. How to live dharmically. It is not just abstraction that Krishna was giving. It is this scripture that tells us it belongs to every age, even for a child, even for people or somebody wanting to do business, or in their work life, or in their family life, or in pursuit of God, or any aspect. And every age, when I'm saying age, Dwapar Yuga or the Kali Yuga or the higher ages, it belongs to every age, every aspect of our lives. It's a most practical guide to how to live. But again, Rod didn't understand that because he was very intellectual, right? And that is why Swamiji writes that another was the courage to reject. They were understanding on a very intellectual way, where he said we considered false even if everyone had believed in them. But he says that we spent hours in intellectual discussion on the uselessness of intellectuality. So they were always on that intellectual level. They were understanding a bit, but it didn't go deeper because they were hanging on that intellect part only. He says no deep wisdom ever came of these. So they would go, they said, people who were doing labor, menial labor, they were lived a more simple life. So they would go and frequent the haunts of truck drivers, and nothing came out of it because, of course, this was all intellectual understanding. Again, on the periphery, nothing you can understand, right? And then he says, but then, he even though he admired Rod, but he could make out that, Rod had his own problems, his own things that he didn't. He says, I disagreed when he Rod and his other friend were saying. He said, I disagreed with the equation. When those guys said that, non-attachment, they said that is the most important thing, and where feelings doesn't have any role in the thing. He said, I felt the important point rather was for one's feelings also to be impersonal. So it cannot be indifference. When we talk about non-attachment, non-attachment doesn't mean being indifferent. So again, he understood it on a very he could intuitively understand this. He says non-attachment releases one from personal identity with things, but should therefore permit an expansiveness, not to eliminate feelings. It is personal feelings resulting from emotions that distort objectivity. And this is where Master also talks about, right? When he's written in Autobiography of a Yogi, where he was challenged by some pundits, and he said, okay, you tell me, where does man, buddhi, ahankar, and heart reside, and how do they relate? They couldn't answer because, it wasn't just scriptural thing. Master said that man is, it resides here, buddhi, ahankar is here, and then the heart, the chitta. And man is how he gave the example of a horse when he said, man is it's like, he calls it mon, he's a Bengali accent. So it is like, man is just, it's like a mirror. It just shows something. It doesn't really understand what it is. Then the intellect comes in and it says, oh, that's a horse. So he said, nobody's caught till then. It's just, the intellect just says that's a horse. The ego says, that's my horse. He says, even here, that entanglement has not happened. It just says that, that's my horse, which means I have to take care of it, I have to feed it and all that. Then the heart comes in the picture, the chitta. It says, oh, how happy I am to see this horse. He says, that is where the person gets caught. The personal feelings resulting in emotions that, Swamiji has understood it. Even at that stage, he says it is personal feelings resulting in emotions that distort objectivity. So and that is why he Master and Swamiji also, they said that when you are, you have a question and you feel, is this the right answer? He says, or what should I do? He says, feel the feeling of the heart. If there is any, disturbance, ripples, that means it is coming from the ego. If it is a divine, your master answering it, or it's, you're intuitively receiving an answer, it is always a calm, expansive feeling in the heart. And that is when, it seems more that it is an intuitive answer. So this also, he was able to intuit, and he understood it. He understood at some deep level that what they were saying is wrong, and that it is not really rejecting, and it is not really being indifferent, that is wrong. Feeling has to come into the picture, but how? Not the ripples of emotions, but an expansive, calm, expansive feeling of the heart. So then he talks about Rod. Here he says, Swamiji notices a lot of problems that Rod had. And many people were talking about it. But again, he also sees the goodness in him. He's like very pragmatic. He's not. So he says that for all that, he was at heart a loving and true friend, deeply concerned about others, despite his, indifference to them, more hurt by anyone's. So he's seeing the good in him. And lastly, he says, I was grateful for his friendship. So gratitude. Even, because Rod, he might have had a lot of negative things about him, but the point was, he also introduced Swamiji, or he was able to engage with Rod, because Swamiji himself was on a quest, and Rod matched him at that level. Even though, he was as probably more ignorant about things, but at least he allowed Swamiji to, explore that aspect. So for that, he's grateful. He says he's a good friend. He is good at, he was ready to see all the good in him, despite all that was not right also. So yet in my association with him, but then he also goes on to say, see, this is how Master always said, environment is stronger than willpower. He says, in my association with him, I also acquired some of the very traits I didn't approve in him. Such indeed is the power of all human associations. So we tend to take on unknowingly most of the time a lot of things, and especially Rod was, as right from the start Swamiji is saying, he was always much more on a higher level kind of a thing, and Swamiji felt that he was the, as he said, the disciple kind of. So it was a strong magnetism, and Master said that it always flows from strong to weak, right? That is how the energy also flows. The strong energy always flows to the weak one, and here especially in human interactions, the magnetism flows from a stronger person, even though if that person might be completely negative or ignorant or whatever it is, and the one who is ready to take from that is absorbing it all. So that is why he says, I developed intellectual pride. Whatever he disapproved in Rod, without him knowing, he had also developed. This is as a defense against rejection, and worst of all, perhaps I acquired some of his worldliness, though never so much as that of it that Rod ceased to twit me for what he called my naivety. So, he kind of became more worldly, which he says is not right, and his intellectual pride. Again, we need to. This is something last where we were talking about just trying to conform. You pick up habits. Here he's talking about the kind of company you keep. It's very important to be careful. Though there was nothing wrong as such when being with Rod, but then it was not really very good either. So, and then he says, we had few. I was seeking truth now, not mere popularity or shared opinions. So here we see that his quest is very much on. He's back from his experiment. He's now very much on his quest, and we see the quality of Swamiji already. From this, even before he came on the path, as I said, humility, the always sticking to the very principle, to sticking with the truth, and being generous about people, about his friends, and seeing only good in them, being grateful uh, for whatever they have offered, whatever he was able to learn from them. So these are the beautiful qualities that we see in Swamiji, and something that we can. It's a takeaway for us also, like uh, seeing good in others and being grateful for whatever life offers us, whatever that person has offered to us. They have come into our lives. If we are able to look at it this way, that there is a purpose why they are there. So see the good in them and be grateful for whatever lessons, even if it's been some of them give us some painful lessons. Being very grateful for even that, for that has allowed us to grow some more. So with that, anybody wants to share anything or some thought, or else we can.
I have a question, Jayanti. I don't know how much it applies to this, but you're saying that Swamiji already had the understanding from probably the previous life, and that made him search and have all these virtues, and question his path and associations. So, what is the hope for most of us who have not really have that from the previous lifetime?
Yes, whether we have not had, as somebody had asked this question, do I have a good karma, or have what kind of karma? The master said this very loud, in fact, as Swamiji says, that he said, remember this, you have very, very, very good karma to even want to know God. So at this moment, if we are here, if we are even wanting to get Kriya, in all this world, there's so much of other temptations going on. But if we decided, no, that means we have been there. It is not the first time we are seeking this.
So true, actually. Need to remember all this when these doubts come up.
Master said that this is not it can't be, because Kriya is, after all the quest, the last is Kriya. So if we have come to that part where we are seeking Kriya, it means we have done this all. He is more aware of it. We have probably been quite lost about it, but we have all been there. It's not.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for joining.
Thank you.